September 5th, 1940, Bletchley Park, Buckinghamshire, 0147 hours. A cold wind rattled the leaves outside the dimly lit brick huts of Bletchley Park as Dr. Henry Tizard stepped into Hut 6 with a leather briefcase chained to his wrist, the floorboards creaking under his polished shoes in the same weary rhythm as the men decoding Luftwaffe signals nearby. The air smelled of cigarette smoke, damp wool, hot valves from radio receivers, and the metallic scent of secrecy. So much secrecy that even the typists looked away when Tizard passed. In the corner of the hut, hidden behind blackout curtains and sandbags, sat a wooden crate stenciled with the false label Agricultural Survey Equipment. Inside it lay the most valuable scientific treasure Britain had ever assembled, a metal cavity shaped like a tiny drum, wires and copper fins wrapped around it like the organs of some mechanical heart. The Magnetron, the compact, high-power radar transmitter that could detect a bomber from miles away, in darkness, through fog, through storms. The technology that could turn the air war in Britain's favor. And Tizard was preparing to give it away. He opened the crate slowly, almost reverently, as if afraid the walls themselves might be listening. The Magnetron sat nestled in padding, humming faintly with residual energy from its last test. It had taken physicists years to perfect. It was the crown jewel of Britain's wartime science, and now with the Luftwaffe hammering London every night, Churchill had approved an unthinkable plan: send Britain's most advanced secrets across the Atlantic in a diplomatic gamble, the Tizard Mission, hoping the Americans would help build them faster, larger, stronger. Dr. John Cockcroft, sleeves rolled up, eyes red from weeks of no sleep, entered the hut, closing the door behind him. "They'll call it madness," he said, voice low, "giving the Americans everything we've built." Tizard didn't respond at first. He stared at the Magnetron's polished copper surface, seeing reflected in it the faint outlines of the scientists whose lives had been consumed by this work: Boot, Randall, Oliphant. Men who had spent nights under blackout curtains while German bombers passed overhead. "Madness," Tizard murmured finally, "is losing the war alone." He kneeled beside the crate and checked the contents again. The Magnetron, the blueprints for airborne radar systems, notes on the proximity fuse, fragments of early jet engine research, data from Bletchley Park on Enigma's weaknesses, and a sealed folder marked Chain Home Vulnerabilities, Top Secret. Everything Britain had that could change the war. Everything they were choosing to gamble on American goodwill. Outside, the distant throb of aero engines rippled through the night air, Heinkel bombers passing toward London. The man inside Hut 6 paused. Everyone listened. The engines faded. Work resumed. Tizard locked the crate and straightened his coat. "The Luftwaffe won't give us time to finish anything on our own. If America can build these faster, then everything we have, every idea, every drawing, every invention must go." Cockcroft hesitated before speaking again. "You're certain Washington can be trusted?" Tizard's expression tightened. That was the unspoken fear. Sharing everything with a nation that had not yet entered the war, that might choose neutrality over alliance. But Britain was running out of options. The Magnetron was powerful, but producing it in large numbers would require factories Britain no longer had. "We trust them, or we die without their help." A soft knock sounded at the door. A young WAAF officer, pale and soaked from the rain, stepped inside. "Sir, the car is ready. They're waiting at the airstrip." Tizard nodded. He snapped the briefcase shut, the chain clinking against his wrist. "Tell them we leave immediately." As Tizard and Cockcroft carried the crate through the dark courtyard, guards scanned the perimeter, rifles slung across their shoulders, eyes shifting nervously between the sky and the shadows. The wind was biting, the kind that cut through wool as if it were gauze. Searchlights swept across the low clouds, the reflection of distant fires painting the night red. London was burning again. At the waiting car, Tizard paused and looked back toward the huts of Bletchley Park, toward the rooms filled with cracking signals, half-solved ciphers, machines that clicked and whirred like mechanical ghosts. If this works, we might just survive this. If it failed, Britain would have handed its last hope to a country that might choose to do nothing. He climbed into the back seat, the crate secured between him and Cockcroft. The driver accelerated into the night, tires hissing over wet gravel. The coastline and the American-bound ship waiting there was still miles away. But as they sped through the blacked-out countryside, past villages where windows glowed from distant fires rather than lamps, past roads where soldiers marched with helmets dripping from the rain, Tizard felt something shift in the air, as if the weight of the Magnetron, humming faintly through its padding, was more than metal, more than invention. It was the turning point of a war. Then, just as the car rounded a bend near a darkened farmhouse, Cockcroft stiffened. He pointed toward the hedgerow. A shape had moved, not animal, not wind. A silhouette, leaning, watching, still. Tizard tensed. The driver slowed. The figure remained just long enough for Tizard to make out something glinting in the dim light, the outline of a camera lens. Then it vanished into the hedges. Tizard's pulse hammered in his throat. It wasn't a villager, not a guard, not one of theirs. Someone had followed them, someone who knew exactly when the mission was departing, someone who had just seen Britain's most valuable secret at the worst possible moment. He turned to Cockcroft. "Did you see that?" Cockcroft swallowed hard. Yes, and whoever they weren't British. The driver pressed harder on the accelerator. Rain lashed the windshield. The coastline drew closer. And as the car disappeared into the dark road ahead, Tizard felt the truth like an icy blade against the spine. The mission hadn't even left Britain yet, and they were already being watched. October 1, 1940, Mid-Atlantic, aboard RMS Scythia, 0312 hours. The Atlantic heaved under a moonless sky as RMS Scythia plowed through black swells, running darkened and silent, every porthole covered, every deck lamp extinguished under strict wartime blackout. In a cramped first-class cabin stripped of its luxury fittings, Dr. Henry Tizard sat at a small bolted table with the briefcase chained to his wrist and the wooden crate of British secrets locked beneath his bunk. The ship groaned with each wave, deck plates shuddering as if the hull were struggling to keep itself above water. Outside, the wind screamed through the rigging, rain slashing the steel like claws. U-boats were rumored to be prowling these waters, wolf packs hunting Allied cargo ships and troop transports without mercy. But none of the men aboard Scythia knew that what Tizard carried was more valuable than any convoy manifest: the cavity magnetron, early jet research notes, proximity fuse theories, British advances in anti-submarine detection, and sensitive summaries of Enigma weaknesses. If a German torpedo found Scythia tonight, all of it, all of Britain's scientific future, would vanish into the cold Atlantic trench. Tizard sat rigid, listening to the thrum of the ship's engines, the muffled clash of waves against steel, the restless creak of the bunk above him, where Dr. John Cockcroft tossed in uneasy sleep. He reached to steady the magnetron crate as the ship lurched again. A sickening thought crossed him. What if the silhouette near the hedgerow back in England had alerted someone? What if they weren't fleeing unseen, but being hunted? He dismissed it, but uneasily. British intelligence reports before departure had warned that German agents were attempting to infiltrate the American scientific community, and that some were already operating along the East Coast. Tizard rubbed his eyes, fatigue hitting like a blow. 3 nights with barely a few minutes of sleep had left him wired. haunted by half-formed worries and the weight of Churchill's final words to him. If America takes this and rejects us, we will have given away our future for nothing. The cabin door rattled. Tizard stiffened. A coded knock sounded. 3 taps, a pause, 2 taps. Cockcroft rolled over in his bunk, instantly awake. Tizard unbolted the door. A Royal Navy escort officer stepped inside, soaked to the skin, voice low and urgent. "Apologies, sir. We've intercepted something." They followed him down the corridor, past lifeboats lashed tight against the storm, toward the wireless room where a single lamp glowed above racks of humming equipment. A wireless operator handed Tizard a strip of paper. Encoded German transmission, bearing approx 310, content unknown but frequency matches prior U-boat coordination signals. Tizard felt his throat tighten. Are they tracking us? The operator shook his head. The signal's too far, but it's close enough to make command uneasy. Cockcroft leaned in. If a wolf pack is nearby, then we stay dark and pray, Tizard finished. They returned to the cabin with the storm battering harder, the ship dipping and rising like a lung struggling to breathe. The hours dragged on. Tizard paced. Rain hammered the porthole. The engines thrummed. Every vibration felt like a possible torpedo impact. In the dim cabin light, Cockcroft cracked open the Magnetron's tight copper ribs, whispering, "This one device, Henry, it could turn radar into something the Americans can build by the thousands. We're risking everything to put it in their hands." Tizard rested his palm on the cold crate. "It's the only card we have left to play." A sudden sound cut through the cabin, a metallic click. Not the ship's usual groan, not the storm. Close, right outside their door. Cockcroft froze, finger pressed to his lips. Another click, then the creak of weight shifting on metal flooring. Tizard signaled him to douse the lamp. Darkness swallowed them. Tizard stepped closer to the door and peered through the narrow crack beneath it. Boots. Not Navy issue. Not merchant marine. The silhouette paused, stood perfectly still, as if listening, then moved on, quietly, almost too quietly. Tizard waited long after the footsteps faded, heart pounding hard enough to echo in his ears. "That wasn't one of ours," Cockcroft whispered. Tizard said nothing. He relit the lump only enough to reveal the Magnetron shadow on the cabin wall. "We reach Halifax at dawn. If Germany is already watching us this closely, we may not have as much time as we thought." The storm battered the Scythia through the night, but the shadow behind their cabin door lingered in Tizard's mind like a stain. Whoever had followed them, whoever was watching, had not turned back. The mission was supposed to be a gamble. Now it felt like a race against an unseen opponent, stalking them across the Atlantic. And as the ship pushed through the freezing black waves, Tizard understood, with a heaviness he could barely breathe through, that the danger to the Tizard mission was not just in the sky or under the water. It was already on board. October 6th, 1940, Washington, D.C., Wardman Park Hotel, 22:41 hours. The corridor outside Suite 612 was dim, lit only by a single frosted bulb that flickered with every vibration of the ancient elevator shaft. Dr. Henry Tizard stood just inside the doorway, back pressed to the wall, breathing shallowly as he listened to the fading footsteps of the stranger who had followed them from the Atlantic crossing. A man they had glimpsed twice in Halifax and once more in Boston, always in the periphery, always disappearing before they could ask who he was. Now, in the quiet halls of the Wardman Park Hotel, the same soft tread had passed their door again, slow and deliberate, the kind that didn't belong to a guest or staff member. Cockcroft gently set down the magnetotron crate, its copper heart wrapped in thick wool and newspaper, then double-locked the suite door. "He's here," Cockcroft whispered. "He followed us from Halifax." Tizard swallowed, extending his hand toward the briefcase chained to his wrist, the folder inside containing radar secrets, proximity fuse calculations, jet engine test results, and every scientific asset Britain had brought to the United States. "He can follow," Tizard murmured, but he cannot stop this mission." Yet as he spoke, doubt coiled coldly in his chest. Their schedule had already been disrupted once when naval officers delayed their disembarkation in Halifax due to suspicious activity on the docks. Another time in Boston, a coded message arrived from British security coordination warning of German agents infiltrating academic circles. And tonight, just an hour earlier, Tizard had noticed a man's reflection in a shop window, tall, wearing a dark overcoat despite the warm evening, vanishing into an alley the moment Tizard turned around. They carried the crate to the far corner of the suite, away from windows, and opened it for the final inspection before tomorrow's demonstration at the National Defense Research Committee. As Cockcroft checked the magnetotron's copper cavities, Tizard paced in silence until he heard it again, the faintest metallic click in the corridor, like someone adjusting a camera shutter or the slide of a pistol. He approached the peephole. Empty hall. But the emptiness itself felt staged. A moment later, Cockcroft whispered, "Henry, look." He gestured toward the bottom of the door. A thin paper envelope had been slid underneath. Tizard picked it up with trembling fingers. Inside, a single message, typed on beige stationery. "You are not as unobserved as you believe. What you carry will not arrive where you intend." No signature, no symbol, no foreign script. Just the blunt warning of someone who knew the stakes. Tizard crushed the paper in his fist. "We tell the Americans first thing tomorrow," Cockcroft said. "No," Tizard breathed. "If we tell them, they'll panic. They'll delay. We cannot afford delay." Because while German bombs still fell nightly on London, and British factories struggled to produce enough radar sets for even a minor air raid, the United States possessed industrial power beyond imagination. Radar in American hands could be produced by the tens of thousands. Proximity fuses could defend ships from dive bombers. Jet engine technology could leap years ahead. And Enigma vulnerabilities, summaries and hints, never full details, could accelerate U.S. code-breaking efforts. Every hour mattered. A knock sounded. Both men froze. 3 taps. Pause. 2 taps. The coded signal. Cockcroft opened the door. Standing there was Dr. Vannevar Bush, head of the NDRC, coat unbuttoned, hair rain-soaked despite the clear sky. He stepped inside without greeting. "Gentlemen," he said in a low voice, "I received a telephone call 15 minutes ago from the FBI. They intercepted a message referencing your arrival tonight, a message believed to have been sent from German diplomatic contacts in New York." Tizard stiffened. "They know we're here?" Bush nodded grimly. "They know someone is here. They don't yet know what you brought." Cockcroft motioned toward the crate. "Then we should move it, tonight." Bush shook his head. "No, that would attract more attention. Leave it here. We triple the security on this floor until morning. And tomorrow we open that crate in front of the President's men and show them exactly why Britain placed its scientific future in American hands." Tizard hesitated. "And the man following us?" Bush's expression darkened. "We have agents sweeping the hallways, but Dr. Tizard," he looked him steadily in the eye, "if Berlin gets any part of what is in that crate, we all lose this war." Hours later, near dawn, the suite finally fell silent. Guards patrolled outside the door. Cockcroft slept sitting upright in a chair, his hand on the magnetotron crate. Tizard lay awake on the bed, staring at the ceiling, mind racing through every possible failure point of the mission. The click of a camera, the shadow in Halifax, the man in the alley, the envelope under the door. But exhaustion finally dragged him under. At 06:09, the phone rang. Tizard jolted awake, fumbling for the receiver. "Dr. Tizard, this is reception. 2 federal agents are here to escort you to the NDRC building." He exhaled in relief. "We'll be down in 15 minutes. But as he hung up, something gnawed at him. He called reception. "Please verify. Did Washington headquarters send you the agents' names?" The clerk hesitated. "Names, sir?" "No, sir, the men said you would recognize them." Tizard's stomach dropped. "Who signed them in?" "No one, sir." Tizard hung up, heart pounding. He snapped open Cockcroft's case and removed the cavity magnetron, still warm from the hotel radiator. He pressed it into Cockcroft's hands. "We're leaving through the kitchen," he whispered. Cockcroft blinked hard. "What?" he said. "Move." They slipped through the service corridor just as two men in dark coats, faces blank, movements stiff, stepped out of the elevator and approached Suite 612 with deliberate slowness. Tizard and Cockcroft hurried through the back stairwell, Magnetron concealed beneath Cockcroft's jacket, and emerged onto a service road behind the hotel, where Bush himself stood beside a government vehicle, jaw clenched. "Did you get my message?" Bush asked. "Your message?" Tizard breathed. Bush's face drained of color. "I sent no agents." The three men stared at each other, realization hitting like cold steel. Those men were not American, they were not FBI, and they were not here to escort anyone. They were here to intercept. Bush opened the car door urgently. "Get in, now!" As the vehicle sped toward the NDRC building, passing the marble facades of Washington still glowing blue in the early morning light, Tizard clutched the magnetron against his chest and felt the weight of the moment settle into him like a second heartbeat. They had escaped by minutes, perhaps seconds, but they had escaped. They arrived at the secure facility under armed escort. Inside, U.S. scientists gathered, Bush, Conant, Lawrence, waiting around a polished table. Cockcroft placed the magnetron on the surface. The Americans leaned forward in silence, and the future of Allied science shifted. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Bush exhaled. "Dr. Tizard, this changes everything." Tizard nodded, finally allowing himself the faintest breath of relief. Because despite the shadows that followed them across oceans and borders, despite the unseen enemy tracking their every step, the mission had arrived. The secret had survived. And in that room, under guarded light, Britain's last hope passed safely into American hands, and the war, quietly, irrevocably, began to turn.